there's so many notes that I have about uh, allaying people's insecurities and so the so-called dark side stuff that we kind of talked about in the beginning of the conversation. But maybe we actually flip the script a little bit, or change gears and start with some positive career advice, because it is tempting to stay with the dark side of the force when we have conversations about power and influence, I think. And not a lot of people probably go with the positive stuff when you're sitting in front of them, right? I don't know, I could be wrong. uh, you do mention in some of the daily laws, there are chapters about reconnecting with your childhood passions. I would love to talk about this because a lot of people, I think the majority of people, like you said, go to school and through school having no idea what they should do. And reconnecting with your childhood passion seems like a really good way to at least get started on the path of figuring that out.
Well, the first chapter in Mastery was called Discover Your Life's Task. And so the first month of the Daily Laws is about that, the month of January, because it's really, if I had to say it, Jordan, it's the most important thing in your life right now, particularly if you're younger. You know, if you're in your 50s or 60s, it's getting a little bit late, I'm sorry to say, but it's never really too late. But if you're younger, man, that is the most important thing you could learn. I can't emphasize it enough because I have studied throughout my years and the thousands of books I've read for my research, biographies of the most successful, famous, creative people, and I've done consulting with people on the highest levels. So I've seen this firsthand, and I've done it in my research. And inevitably, these are people who understood at some point in life that this is what I was destined to follow. This is a path for me. Now, that path might have been, most people, it's like a zigzag. You don't have a straight line, this is what I was meant to do. It's never like that. It wasn't for me. But you kind of have an idea, and it becomes clearer and clearer, and you find that path, and it leads to so much power. You become so creative and so energized because you enjoy your work, you learn faster, you're engaged emotionally with what you're doing. It is so important. And a lot of people who were successful had a clear idea when they were 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
Some people discovered it at the age of 12 or 18. Me, I really didn't discover it till I was about 35.
Is this 60 jobs later or 80 jobs later?
Probably 80 jobs later
Crazy.
when I got to write the 48 Laws of Power. But anyway, so it's not easy, and a lot of people get confused. And why do you get confused? Well, the psychologist Abraham Maslow, who studied a lot of children, for instance, he said that children, and you'll maybe know this with your 2-year-old, they have what he calls impulse voices. And these are voices that say, I like this, I don't like that. I like this kind of food, I hate this, I'm going to spit it out. Right? I like this person, I don't like that person. They're very clear. They know what they like and what they don't like. It's so obvious to them in an almost pre-verbal sense.
It's like binary. Yeah. It's
Right.
just, yeah, there's almost no lukewarm with my kid anyway. He's either open-minded or it's not happening.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
really kind of on and off, and that's it.
That's exactly. So everyone had that because it's the nature of being an infant in this world, right? Because it's natural. It's a voice that's naturally inside of all of us. And then as you get older, you start listening to Mr. Harbinger and Mrs. Harbinger telling you, don't do this, Jaden, do this. You know, this is what you should behave like this. Don't behave like that. And the kid starts getting a little confused. So I say, well, my voice tells me to do this, but I'm told not to do that. And slowly you go through a process where you're not hearing it anymore. You're hearing what teachers tell you. You're hearing what parents tell you. You're hearing what peers are telling you about what's cool, what's not cool. You're hearing what social media nowadays is telling you. I'm talking about like your career, what you were meant to do. And then you arrive, you're 18, 19 years old, and you haven't a clue because you can't hear that voice anymore. And you're going to try this, that, the other, not based on things that are deep inside of you, but based on what other people have told you you should do or what they think is cool. And you're going to end up trapped. You're going to end up choosing a career path that seems seductive and interesting and lucrative. And 5 years down the line, you realize it doesn't really interest me. And you hit a wall and you go, fuck, man, what's going on with my life? You start maybe drink. I know I'm giving you a little exaggerated scenario here, but you start drinking.
I thought you were just narrating my exact life story, but continue. So far, spot on.
Well, you get addicted to online porn, you know, on and on and on and on and on, right?
That's funny.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, and then you're 30, and then it's starting to get a little late,
Yeah.
right? Okay, So the problem is, how do you clear away all of that that noise, that white noise that's drowning out your impulse voices, and actually hear what was your voice when you were 2 years old, right? And so it's a process. I've done it in consulting with people, trying to help them figure it out. People will say, Robert, I have no idea. So, I haven't a clue what I was meant to do in this world, right? You talk about my early childhood, I can't remember anything. Okay, so it's not, for a lot of people, it's not obvious or easy, and I understand that. But we go through a process, if I'm able to do that with them, online or in person sometimes, where we reconstruct some of the early memories of things that really excited them when they were a kid and things that they hated. And a book that I always recommend to people, it's on the shelf somewhere right behind you, I don't see it right now, called The Five Frames of Intelligence by Howard Gardner. Really good book.
We'll link to that in the show notes.
Okay. The idea is, we normally associate intelligence with kind of book learning and intellectual learning, but he says there are 5 different kinds of intelligence, and each is equally valid and important. One of them will be obviously words and language, which is something that I was attracted to. Some of it will be with figuring out patterns. It leads to like a mathematician or somebody interested in statistics. Another one's a little more abstract. I can't remember which one that is. Leads to like music. Then there's kinetic intelligence.
Like
where,
athletes.
Yeah, it's all about your body. And that's a very high form of intelligence. We don't think of it that way, but it is a form of intelligence. There's a social intelligence where it's all about people, right? And he makes the point that a child has one of those forms of intelligence that dominates inevitably. Some people might have another one that's kind of in the background, but one of them inevitably dominates in them, right? And if you choose a career that's not really in alignment with what you're naturally gifted for, your brain was wired in a particular way. It's genetic, okay? Right? And if you're not following that, forget it. You'll never get anywhere. So we go through a process of trying to figure out what is, just in the most general way, let's not get so specific about your actual career choice. What is that form of intelligence that you're inclined towards? It's not difficult. Were you really attracted to sports and movement? Do you find you're most joyous when you're like dancing or running, and that's what gets you excited and you think about that? Okay, well, that's probably in some ways where your brain is wired. Is it words and just the sound of words that kind of obsess you and fascinate you like it did when I was a kid? You should probably be involved in some form of writing, right? Okay, so we go through that process. What is your frame of intelligence? We kind of determine that. And then we kind of reconstruct certain key moments in your childhood where you did something and it felt right. Now, a lot of people don't have that. I maintain that everybody has it. You have to kind of dig. But you did something, and in the process of doing it, it felt like there was kind of an ease to it, as opposed to learning math when you don't like math. There's no ease involved, right? For some people, that ease is in math. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's kind of put our finger on that for a little bit, on and on and on. And then as we get older, I like to look at what people hate. So when I was 23, I discovered that I hated working for other people.
Well,
that's why I had 60-some different jobs.
And that makes sense.
I don't like the political games. I don't like all the bullshit. I don't like all the stuff, all the things you have to play and pretend. I'm an entrepreneur. It took me a long time to figure it out because I never had a job more than 11 months in my entire life. It took me time, okay, I should be working for myself because I don't like working for other people. So if we detect in this person that they don't like that, and that's a lot of people, I'm afraid, in the world today, you should be an entrepreneur. You should be working for yourself eventually. So that's part of the process that we go through. It's more complex than that, but that gives you an idea of what it's like.
I love this because when I was a kid, I learned how to build out of like little parts from Radio Shack an FM radio transmitter. And it was kind of interesting because I would solder these little things in, and my dad was a mechanical engineer, and he goes, wow, I wonder if my kid's going to be an electrical engineer. And then when I built it, and it didn't work. It was frustrating, but someone helped me fix it. And then I could transmit my voice to the radio, probably like, 50 feet away. And that was the part that was the most interesting. And I realized I didn't really care about making the thing as much as I cared about somehow being able to talk to my friends and things like that. So I wanted to turn the power up on this thing. And I learned that you could do that by like breaking federal law and attaching a high gain antenna.
And then communicating with the Russians.
Well, yes, yeah, accidentally communicating with the Russians. Yeah, this is like an 80s Disney movie or something like that, like Cloak and Dagger. But I wanted to be, I said, I want to be able to talk to everyone in the neighborhood on their radios. And they were like, that's super illegal. You can't do that. And my mom sort of put the kibosh on that project. Then I go through this whole path and I'm good at studying, and I go through college and I get good grades, and I decide I guess I should go to law school because more school is better. So then I become a lawyer, but I already knew I didn't want to become a lawyer. And then I start the podcast in my second year of law school, and I end up on Sirius XM satellite radio. And then I quit law and I come back to this, and I didn't remember that when I was a kid I wanted to be on the radio.
Wow.
I only remembered it probably 8 years plus after doing
That's
this.
a perfect example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'd frickin' listened to myself, I could have gone to broadcasting school.
No.
Whatever,
Everything's for a reason. It was better that way. First of all, your law career taught you some interesting things that you're never going to forget.
That's true.
There's some skill sets that were created then. And then if you had found your way to podcasting too early, it wouldn't have the same meaning to you.
That's true.
Now you're so excited that you found the right thing because you kind of hated law and law school, that it means much more, and you actually are more motivated to follow it through. Like if I had been offered to write a book when I was 24, instead as opposed to 35, 36, it would have never worked. I didn't have the experience, I didn't have the desperation, etc.
That makes sense. I mean, I didn't even get into podcasting because I thought it would be fun to do a show. I got into podcasting because I was recording a lecture of a course that I was teaching, and I needed to put it online.
Wow.
And podcasting was the only way to put it in.
You've had like 80 different jobs.
Yeah, I mean, this was during law school. I was teaching a networking class, and I kept I'm giving them the same damn talk every week. I need to record it on my Sony minidisc player, take it, and then get it to my computer, make an MP3 file, and put it on the internet. But there was no SoundCloud, there was no YouTube, So my friend said, "Hey, there's podcasting. You can put these files online," and that was the birth.
What year are we talking about?
2006.
That was just the beginning of podcasting.
I think we were one of the first 800 or first 1,000 shows.
I can only remember my first podcast was like in 2008. And I was like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, it's like a downloadable radio show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and here we are. So you're right. It sort of makes sense, because if someone said, "Hey, you should start a podcast," I'd go, "Well, I'm not going to be some guy who records stuff in his basement. That's dumb." And then I did that for a long time, and here we are.
Yeah.
What do we do when we realize we've chosen the wrong career? Like if we just get up and we realize, look, I'm not just burned out. I'm not for years. I'm finally going to do something about it. What is that thing that we do?
Well, one thing, just to backtrack a minute here, one thing I left out, the reason why you want to follow this path isn't just because it's some kind of mystical destiny sort of idea. The human brain works best, we learn fastest when we're emotionally engaged, when we're interested and excited by something. The brain opens up, we become like a sponge because we want to learn, and our attention is much deeper, and so we learn faster. So if you choose the wrong career for whatever reason, like you go to law school and you're kind of half listening as the professor's droning on, you're kind of half reading the books. Yeah. You're not involved in it, and so you're not learning fast enough, right? And if you don't learn fast enough, creativity, which is what we all want, is a function of the intensity of your knowledge, of the information you have absorbed. The faster you absorb information, the more thoughts and associations you create in the brain. It starts going all the time, and ideas are coming to you. If you take 5 years to learn something, that stuff going on in the brain won't happen. So that's why we want to do it, okay? So you're going to find out in your career that you are not emotionally engaged, that isn't happening. The gears aren't connecting. You're tuning out. You're not paying attention, right? And you kind of realize that. Okay, so you have to be able to realize that. And not a lot of people are going through their 20s, for instance, because they're going after a big paycheck. They're unaware that they're actually not really attuned to to what they're supposed to be learning. Okay? But once you have that moment, it kind of depends on how old you are. So there's not like a single formula for what you should do. So if you're 24 and you realize you made the wrong choice, that's great. Now we can go through a process and you can make a fairly radical shift in your career decision because you haven't wasted, I'm not saying wasted, that's too harsh a word, but you haven't spent 15 years in something not relevant to you. It's only been a couple of years. All right, let's go through the process of figuring out what you should to do, and let's kind of change your skill set, right? Let's start heading in that towards that direction of what you were intended to do. You can make a more radical shift. But if you're in your 30s, I wouldn't recommend that because you need to make a living, right? You have learned things, you have learned certain skills. So what I recommend is not a radical shift, but a more subtle shift, heading more in that direction. And that might include keeping the job that you have, but at night going to school or online, learning some new skills that you now can quit. Your plan is to quit this job in 2 or 3 years, but you will have learned things that will allow you to quit and go on to this other path. Or you figure out a way to kind of shift it. So I knew a woman, Allison Hope Weiner, I don't know if you know her.
Mm-mm.
She has a podcast.
Many people have.
Many
There
people
are
do.
2 point whatever million.
I thought everyone knew each other.
Yeah, we all hang out.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really, really big cafe.
Anyway, she, like you, she studied law, and then she realized that she wanted to be a writer. And so what she did is she went into legal journalism. That was how she made a shift, because she could still make a living. She could become a writer, and then she learned true writing skills, and then she could maybe write a novel if she wanted to at that point, kind of thing. So that's the kind of more gradual shift. If you're in your 40s,
right,
it's even more gradual that you have to do. But the thing is, all your life, you've been accumulating experiences. You have to keep that in mind. So even when I was working in Greece, because I landed on the island of Crete one summer, and I got very sick, and I ran out of money, and I was in a hospital.
Oh my gosh.
And then I came out, and I had no money to get back to Paris, wherever I was living. I had to go work in construction.